Now, the most trusted name in radio, Rhett Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves.
He is Don Bell. The title of his new book is Struggle to Zero. And I believe it's available everywhere. Books are sold, right?
Right.
Good for you. And when did you first come out with this?
About 3 or 4 years ago.
3-4 years ago.
Right.
Okay, well, it's new to me anyway.
It took me about 4 years to write.
Now, Don Bell's new book is a profound account of a man, and his career as an agent of the United States Secret Service. Triumphs and failures of many unforgettable encounters in life are gripping and potent autobiography that accounts his journey of personal faith and his will to succeed in his endeavor. He is involved with the protection of former President Truman, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, and Vice President Bush. And I got to interview Carter, and I got to interview the Bushes, of course, President Bush. I got to meet with him, and Truman I did not meet, Nixon I did not meet, and I wish I'd met Reagan. So Secret Service. Well, first of all, thank you for your service to the United States, sir.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Is the Secret Service under the helm, the protection, the umbrella of the military, or is it separate?
No, the United States Secret Service was created on April the 14th, 1865 by President Lincoln. At that time, first of all, at that time, at least about a half of the paper currency in the United States was being counterfeited. It became a national crisis.
Sure.
So President Lincoln authorized his Secretary of the Treasury to create the U.S. Secret Service.
Ironically, he got assassinated.
He did, and he surely did. And he was assassinated on April 14th, I believe. Or the night before, April 13th. He was shot April 13th at the theater. And then he died on April the 14th, I believe. And then the Secret Service, as I say, was formed on that date and to investigate the counterfeiting of the currency. And then from 1865 up until 1908, the Secret Service was the main investigative arm of the U.S. government. We investigated practically all federal violations. Now, the U.S. Marshal Service, they did their thing. But until 1908, when the FBI was formed, and 8 Secret Service agents went over to form the FBI in 1908. And then from 1908 until on May the 10th, 1924, there were 4 FBI directors, and 2 of the 4 ended up in prison. I mean, they had problems with the law because it was a new agency being created, and blah blah blah, bad things will happen. And on May the 10th, 1924, at the age of 29, J. Edgar Hoover became the director, okay? And, of course, as we all know, he was director from May the 10th, 1924 until 1973. He was director 48 years.
Oh, my word.
Yeah.
That can be dangerous. Talk about term limits, you know what I mean?
Man.
He must have wielded a lot of power.
Oh, he did. He became one of the most powerful individuals in the U.S. government.
Did you ever get to meet him?
I was around him, his office, in and out. And
Would
so
you
forth.
say that he was a man of integrity?
He was, and
Thank God, a man with that kind of power.
He
with
was
him.
very strict with everything,
Very strict.
He throughout the years, of course, when someone holds an office that long, the employees under them become afraid of them. They become afraid to do anything. Anything out of the ordinary.
Don't paint over the
they're afraid
lines.
they will be fired.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're afraid they'll be fired because the FBI was not under the civil service, so you had no protection as an FBI employee ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the situation. So that was generally the story on J. Edgar Hoover. And as getting back to the Secret Service briefly here, we did not start protecting presidents until President Teddy Roosevelt. Right after President McKinley was assassinated in 1901, then Congress authorized the Secret Service to start protecting the president full time.
Well, people don't realize that Abraham Lincoln went to Gettysburg on a train by himself, got off the train by himself, and walked to the location by himself.
He did, and one time there in D.C., he went out to the old soldiers' home by himself at night, and that was not all that far from the Capitol building. But on the way back, he was riding his horse by himself, and with his big stove pipe hat. And
I saw that hat in a museum up in Vermont.
And someone took a shot at him, and it went through the hat.
No.
Yes. And
they tried to assassinate the president then?
They did, and there was a young...
well, kind of like a neon sign wearing that big hat.
I mean, I'm not kidding. But that was never reported on.
No, I've never heard it until I've talked to you.
There was one witness to that, a young fellow, I believe he's a military type out there, and he saw what happened, but Lincoln told him to not ever mention this.
Why?
Or say anything about it, because he did not want to develop any fear or whatever during that period of time, due to the turmoil in the country.
I'll tell you a story. I want to know if you know this. Now, you told me something I didn't know. And I got to tell this to President Carter when I was interviewing him. And he did not know this. I also got to tell Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Oh, my goodness.
You know her, right?
Oh, yeah.
The famous historian. Now, she's been on my show more than once.
Really?
And we got along, which is amazing because I'm a guy with an 8th grade diploma. And I'm talking to these people and complimented. And I'm going, well, at least I fooled her. But anyway, so I'm on the phone with her. And she was consulting the movie on Abe Lincoln at that time. So I believe it's had an influence on this getting in the movie with Steven Spielberg. I'll tell you what happened. So Abe Lincoln was sitting in the Ford Theater. And according to Mary Todd Lincoln, which is my lineage, by the way, I'm directly related. Yeah, my grandmother gave me a whole typed out thing on. I got a penny, and I got the whole thing in my wallet. I'll show it to you if you want to see it. But anyway, from Civil War, penny from the Civil War. Anyway, so she says they were watching a comedy. And it was totally out of character. But he turns from the comedy and turns to Mary Todd Lincoln and says, Mary, I'm imbued with a desire to go to Jerusalem. Boom! He's killed. Those are his last words. People don't know that. Okay. So being a man who's had a spiritual encounter with Jesus at the age of 29, me, I realized that I believed that was an unction of the holiness of God preparing him for remember, he had dreamt a few days earlier that he was walking around the White House saying, what's the matter? Why is everybody so glum? And they said, because the president's dead, and so, but anyway, so was that a precognition that he had or something at that moment, and then was killed shortly after that, shot by a Booth. So President Carter said, no, he had never heard it. And Doris Kearns Goodwin said she had never heard it. But I guess they looked into it, and she brought it up to Spielberg. They'd already shot the scene in Ford's Theater, so they couldn't put it in there. So when they're riding on the carriage going to the theater that night, he's riding. It's just he and Mary Todd Lincoln. He's riding the thing. They don't have a rider or a driver or anything. No. And so he says that there in the carriage. So they kind of weaved it in there. But as far as I know, that's not where it happened. Happened in the theater. But anyway, I didn't know if you heard that. Now, I've never heard the story of you telling me about that shot through the hat.
Yes, that happened. Because you can understand why he would not want it to be publicized.
Might inspire other characers?
Right, and the turmoil and everything going on with the slave issue and all that stuff. So he told the young fellow to not ever say anything about it.
Yeah, and just an aside here, the Emancipation Proclamations, not one Democrat voted for that. Not one Democrat. But they were different parties back then.
Yeah, the parties have switched. I mean, they just changed over the years.
Even now, since you and I have been alive.
Yeah, it's
What's going on now?
That's the way they do. They just switch back and forth.
And people didn't. Now, did you work with John F. Kennedy?
I did not.
Okay, but you were around then.
I was in college. I had started college at that time, so I was in
Okay.
college.
But you know about him. He was a genuine hero. And when he became elected, 50% of his his inner circle, he picked Republicans, much to the chagrin of the Democrats. There was a man who really wanted to, walk the line there, I think.
Now,
was he perfect? No. Maybe he sinned with ladies. I had a lady lived in town here, was the former secretary, and she said they'd be swimming naked in the pool at the White House with a bunch of women, and then they said, Jackie just drove up, get out of the pool.
Believe me, he was not the only president.
Right.
I know all about all of them. But anyway, now I was around his brother when he was Attorney General, and now
Robert.
what happened? You're right. Right out of high school. Okay, 2 weeks out of high school. During my senior year, I had applied for a position, a low-level position with the FBI.
Really?
Yes. And
what gave you the attraction to want to be in law enforcement?
Well, what I did was an FBI agent there in Western Tennessee stopped by our high school and left a couple of brochures telling about employment with the FBI. And what Hoover likes to do, one of the things he liked to do as far as hiring young employees, he liked to hire them from rural areas and so forth, young and from rural
Maybe because he thought they were pliable and he could.
They would never know when they're working too hard. I put it that way.
Yeah.
And they would obey orders. They worked hard and blah blah.
Salt of the earth.
Oh yeah. So one day I went into school and I saw that brochure there in my senior year. I picked it up and took it home. And you know what I did? I made the phone call. I cannot emphasize enough for these young kids to make a phone call. And when they see an opportunity and all that.
Who did you call?
Well, I phoned the number on the brochure to the FBI office.
And said, I want to apply.
Right, I did. And from there, 2 weeks out of high school,
that's amazing.
On a Sunday night, before I had to be at my job on Monday in D.C., so I landed at Washington National Airport at 11:30 p.m. at night.
Coming in from where?
From
Kentucky,
Western Tennessee.
Okay.
Okay, over in the very north of Memphis. There was
All right.
Union City really was a place they had a small airport.
Yeah.
And they had one DC-3 airplane coming in there, and it was like a puddle jumper, and so it took me from Union City to Nashville. And there I boarded a DC-6 American Airlines plane for a nonstop flight to DC. So I landed there at Washington National Airport, and lo and behold, I had forgot to advise them about finding a place for me to stay that night. See, I was just greenhorn right out of high school.
Yeah.
I was over 900 miles away, and I came from the cotton fields.
And you must have been very excited.
Well, I thought to myself, Lafayette, I am here, But anyway, I phoned in, and they had someone on duty, and they located a little hotel room for me over near almost on the campus of George Washington University, and I went there. So anyway, so that's how things got started off, and so I had the lowest level job in the U.S. government, GS2.
The GS2.
$29.60 a year.
$2,960
$160 a year. That's how much.
What?
$2,960 a year. That's how much.
$2,000, almost $3,000 a year.
Yeah. So anyway, I got in there, and then I started out, and I became. Now remember, it's 2 weeks out of high school. I was 18, and I started out as a file clerk for a month, and then from there, I applied to become an fingerprint clerk, searching fingerprints through the criminal files. Okay, at that time they had in the criminal files they had about 36 million fingerprint cards there, because the law enforcement agencies throughout the U.S. would, when they arrested someone, or whatever, if they wanted someone's applying for a job, they wanted know if they had a criminal record, so they just would send it in, and we would
Sent it meant mail, snail mail back then.
Yeah. So I did that, and then I saw an opportunity while being a fingerprint clerk. That was tedious work. Oh my goodness. And there was an opportunity to become a tour leader, FBI tour leader.
What does that mean?
Meaning that I went to school 8 hours a day for 3 or 4 weeks, learning the total and complete history of the FBI. Everything about J. Edgar Hoover, you name it. We were in classroom, and we were taught how to explain. I took tours on tours of FBI headquarters. Now, here I was. I started doing that at age 20.
So essentially, it's a public relations job because you're trying to impress the people that are paying for this with their taxes, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was just one of the things the FBI Hoover wanted to do. You know,
Smart man,
yeah,
apparently.
Oh, yeah. And so I became a tour leader, and at the time you had to wear a suit, white shirt.
Yeah, but that's quite an upgrade from being a clerk with fingerprints.
Tell me, a suit, white shirt, no lace-up shoes.
No lace-up.
And no flat-top haircuts. You had to have a part in your hair.
I wonder why
That was just the image they wanted to portray, and so here we are, and it was something else. So for 2 years, anywhere from 2 to 4 times a day, I would take groups of tourists from all over the United States.
How small to how large?
They tried to keep the group no more than 20 at a time, you know. So we could maneuver around the laboratory and
I didn't know to this moment you could take a tour. I'd like to take that tour.
Yeah, I don't know that you can now, but this was in 1960 when I started doing that.
Sure.
Okay, and so 2 to 4 times a day I would go through the headquarters, and they had all these exhibits. John Dillinger, the Mal Barker, and all these gangsters, and the Brinks robbery, and the espionage, the Rosenberg spy case. And so I would explain, and then the laboratory. I would go through and explain every section of the laboratory. And at the end of the tour, you finished with an FBI agent down in the indoor firing range putting on a firing exhibit.
That's a dramatic way to end it.
So, and then, but the point I was going to get to, then I won't linger here. At that time, Robert Kennedy was the Attorney General when, at the time. He was 35 years of age, and on numerous occasions, I would go up to his office and take friends of his on a tour of the FBI. That was a hoot. I mean, here he was, 35, and I'd walk in there, and they would introduce me to his friends, and hey,
Do you remember any of them being celebrities or famous? Or
I do not.
No.
And I don't. These were just normal friends of his, and he would arrange the tour.
So you took them on the tour?
Yeah, and then after the tour was complete, I would take them back up to his office and go in. He was there walking around with his shirt sleeves rolled up, then being, the Attorney General. And at that time, he had 7 kids. He ended up with 9. And I have a photograph in his office, and I'm in the background there. And he's standing on his desk, holding up the 7 photographs of his 7 kids in his arm, with his hand there, and explaining to the kids that we had taken on the tour. And lo and behold, at that time, guess his oldest son, Robert Kennedy Jr., he was in that one of the photographs. And of course, he is running for president today.
Now, yeah.
And but anyway, that was...
I met him too. I met him at the Poughkeepsie Airport when he was running for the presidency after the death of his brother.
Yeah.
But the thing with the FBI is that they today, I'm told, we the people spend $800 million annually on the Secret Service for the president and the president alone. That does not include the first lady. It does not include the children. It does not include senators. It does not include congressmen.
Right.
Just for the president alone, nearly $1 billion, $800 million annually to protect the president. Now, Bert Lee used to live in town here. Did you know Bert? He's the former White House physician for George Bush.
No, I don't.
Used to come on my show all the time anyway. And he would say that George Bush Sr. tried not to take Air Force One too often because people don't know that there's Air Force One, but there's also a duplicate for all the medical equipment, right? Air Force One number 2 or whatever. And so this would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars just to go on a little trip.
Oh, yeah.
And he didn't want to spend the people's money that way.
So anyway, and then later on, okay, after I was in D.C. 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I left. I resigned from the FBI and attended
Why?
college. Attended college.
Oh.
I was 4 years behind, so I wanted to go to college. So
I'm surprised the FBI didn't get behind you and say, "Look, we'll pay for your schooling."
No. That would have been great. No. I had to pay for everything myself.
How did you work? What did you do to work yourself through college?
Well, I worked at a men's clothing store there. I went to Murray State University in Murray, Kentucky, one of the universities over in the western part of the
And what were you studying?
Well, I ended up with a degree, a minor in history, and a degree in social science. Okay.
And what would that be? What's social science?
Well, that's sociology.
Like history.
Sociology and all the social sciences and so forth. And so that was the degree I ended up with.
Like I took Social 101 and Social 102. That would be condensed little short class I took in a community college, and we find out what an oligarchy is, and dictatorship, and so, all these other things.
So I managed to get through and graduate, and now remember I was 4 years behind there. I had some catching up to do. So at the age of I earned my degree in August 1965. Okay, so here I have this degree. Well, what do you do? And at that time I really did. I was homeless.
Homeless?
Basically.
Where'd you sleep?
Well, I had a brother. That lived in Memphis. Okay.
And so you'd sleep on his floor.
He was renting a place in Memphis, and so he set up for me to stay there. And then what I did was I walked by the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve unit in Memphis and Motor Transport Battalion, and said, "Man, I've got to have a place to go."
So you joined the Marines?
I walked in there off the spur of the moment, and man, I had to have a place to go and stay or whatever, sleep, blah blah blah. And so I go in there, and the old colonel, he was sitting there, and he said, "Well, okay, son, yes, we have some openings," and so forth. And I said, "Well, that's what I did. I ended up saying yes, sign me up." And so
what was the salary of that back then?
That was $80 a month, I think.
$80 a month. Well, that was better than the $300 a year. Now you're getting 80, so that's
three squares.
That's about $1,000 a year. Yeah.
3 squares and everything else. So anyway, that's what I did out of desperation.
So you joined the Marines. By the way, thank you.
The reserves.
Reserves. Now, differentiate that for me. So that means you're not in full time.
Right. Well, now you're on active duty 6 months. Okay.
Well, you are on active duty 6 months.
And I went to Paris Island, and I was in with regular Marines. Now remember, 65 was
hoorah!
You're doing the buildup of the forces in Vietnam. I mean, it was unbelievable. So anyway, I did that. I finished my 6 months and got out, and then my unit was located in Memphis, and so.
So the 6 months you're off, what did you do with yourself? Something else?
Well, after I got off active duty 6 months, then I had to go to monthly meetings.
Monthly meetings.
1 weekend a month.
1 weekend a month.
You had a 6-year obligation.
Yeah.
And,
6-year obligation.
6 year.
6 year. Wow. Yeah. Would you say that the Marines gave you a discipline that make you a better man?
You better believe it. They gave you a discipline of all disciplines. I mean,
because we see that in the movies at the Marines. Hoorah!
during that period of time, as you say, they had this buildup going,
Yeah.
and everything, and they were training. They had to train these Marines to show you what I'm talking about. I was the first battalion in the Marine Corps Reserves to go from a 12-week boot camp to an 8-week boot camp. So what they did, they crammed that 12 weeks into 8 weeks, so they could get you out of there and send you to Camp Pendleton, and from Camp Pendleton they would send you over to Vietnam. And
did you go to Vietnam?
No, I did not.
Thank God. Huh?
For all the whole period of time I was in the reserves, every month I would go into my monthly meeting, and I would be told, now you will be going, you'll be activated before the next month. So I put up with this for like 4 years. Okay, so
worried your numbers coming up.
And I don't know what happened, but now that motor transport regiment, the Marine Corps Reserves consists of 3 regiments: motor transport, air wing, and infantry. 3 regiments. So they never activated the motor transport regiment.
And what would the motor transport regiment? What would you do?
Drive trucks. I mean, they were transportation.
So they didn't.
Yeah.
So they could have flown you over to Vietnam to drive trucks in
Right,
Vietnam, but they didn't.
No, because I guess there were too many jungles. I don't know, but just being facetious. But anyway, I then while I was there, I applied. I got a job, back in the FBI office in Memphis. Okay.
Oh.
Due to the fact I'd worked for them in D.C., they had an opening, not as an agent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but anyway, they had an opening, so I applied and they hired me there.
That's great. So you're back with the FBI,
right? In the
but
Memphis
now with a
field office.
degree.
With a degree, and what happened from there?
What would you hire to do?
I applied to become a Secret Service agent.
A Secret Service
Yes,
agent,
yes.
and that means working with the president, or what?
Yeah, being a full-fledged agent. Yes, you had to go through training and background investigation, and everything. But before I left to become a Secret Service agent, while I was waiting on being hired by them, I was there the night Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Okay.
You were in Memphis.
Yeah, I was in the field office. I went to work that night. Stephanie, my wife, and I, we were eating at Beretta's restaurant at afternoon, and we were sitting there about 5 or 6 o'clock, and I had to be going to work to be there at 10 or whatever. And all of a sudden, screams started coming from the kitchen and this and that or whatever, just screams, blah, blah. And that's when we determined that Dr. King had been assassinated. So here, old Bill had to go into work that night, and so as I went in there, man, it was just chaos. I mean, the rifle was there that was used, and all his clothes that he was wearing, they were there. They came from the morgue. And so guess what my assignment was there? I was assigned to prepare all of his bloody clothes. It was unbelievable. And package them up to be flown to the FBI laboratory for ballistics tests.
Yeah.
And then, as I say, they had
gunpowder and all that other
there,
stuff.
Man, I'm telling you, and it is just.
Let me ask you this.
Terrible. I mean,
let me ask you this. Now, you're a white guy from Kentucky.
Yeah.
I'm a white kid from upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea why I always had a penchant for black people. I don't know why. Maybe we had a maid named Violene, who I hope to see in heaven one day.
Mm-hmm.
I was told about Jesus from another man, Morrell Diggs, when I was very young, 19. He was a janitor, fell asleep on his reading his little Bible. I don't know why, but anyway, I would always was reading. My first book I ever read was on George Washington Carver, and then there was anyway, the guy who started the university.
I know who you're talking about. He was very well-known, famous scientist there.
Brilliant man,
unbelievable.
And then, but Martin Luther King. Throughout the years, I'm reading books. There's a new book out of him that's fabulous, by the way, because there's books written, and some books you read and kind of okay. some writers, authors had just this ability to suck you in. It's a big, thick, like 800,000 pages. I don't buy books now, so I got it at the library, but it's almost so good that I want to buy it because every time I just happen to open, I'm going to kill a few minutes here, and I'll read it, and it's just amazing what this guy went through and his commitment to peace. This was a man great. He said, hate does not conquer hate. Love conquers hate. And and I'll tell you this. I want to talk about this a little bit. We got a lot to do. We're gonna have to do many interviews, obviously, you and I. But anyway, we're gonna have some fun. I don't know when you were in here before, but obviously,
about 4 years ago.
well, maybe I was busy. Didn't bite the bait, but maybe this is the time because we got a lot to discuss.
I didn't have the book out.
Oh, you didn't. No. Okay, so I had his former photographer on my show. Lived down in South Florida. I doubt he's still alive. But anyway, he said, and he was a white guy. So when he became famous, Jesse or what all these other people said, let's get rid of the whitey there. And Martin Luther King, Dr. King says, no, what are we doing? What's all this about? In other words, it's not about starting up reverse.
Right.
So anyway, he said later on in life, they came to him and offered him a lot of money in New York City to write a book. Like 9 chapters, but 1 chapter, he could write anything he wanted to about Martin Luther King. But he said you had to take 1 chapter and suggest that he was having an affair. Now, he said, we were the press. We all talked and conferred with each other. If he'd been having an affair, we would have all talked about it. Sure. How reprehensible to try to dismantle or to mar a man's historic name later on in life. What kind of a low life worm attempts to do that to a man who's gone? But all the things he said, I love Martin Luther King. You want to hear the cool thing about? No,
go
ahead. I don't. You're in your 80s, right? And I'm in my 70s. Yeah. Now he was very wise beyond his years. But I got
only 39 when he was.
Yeah, I know. How do you get to be that bright? But it's like I went to Africa with Coretta Scott King. We happened to be on the same jet together for the 10th anniversary of Rhodesia becoming Zimbabwe. But and I've had his niece on the show and stuff like this. But he was just a great man. So I was bringing this back to you, and how would I connect the dots here? What we were talking about?
About my experience there when he was assassinated.
Oh yeah, you took care of his clothes.
Yes, I was the last person to handle his.
You're the guy right here.
The last one to handle his clothes before they entered into the
evidence
chain.
Okay. Now your father was a Methodist preacher.
He was.
Okay. So I don't know if you had a perfunctory relationship with Jesus or you had a really dedicated relationship with Jesus.
It was a continuous relationship because
I believe in Jesus.
4 or 5 churches.
Who did?
Old church. My dad did.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
But here's the thing: Martin Luther King was a real man because that little white photographer. He told me that one time he was going through something in his life that wasn't good. We all go through ups and downs. Sure. He said they got on the plane to go to some other town. He's Martin Luther King's photographer. And he said he was having problems. He said Martin Luther King undid his tie, took off his hat, and he said for the next 2 hours he was my preacher. He was my minister, and he ministered to me. Sure. This man had greatness running his blood. But I will say this, on behalf of our Father in heaven, I hate to say it. I mean, this is just me, a guy making this up. I'm just the shoeshine boy from Poughkeepsie, New York. But, by his death, it punctuated his life, and it sort of thrusts you in, every month there's a new book out on Lincoln. Every week there's a new book out on the Civil War. Did you know that? They sell more than all books.
I didn't realize it.
That's what I was told.
Yeah.
And I'm told a lot of things, but Martin Luther King. I don't know if people think about it, but every day somebody doesn't get killed because some little offended black boy is going to go out and shoot somebody, and Mama says, "No, Dr. King said,"
right,
and they choose peace.
Right.
They choose the way of peace. As Mahatma Gandhi did. And certainly Dr. King certainly accomplished a lot, did he not?
He did, and every great person in history, 100% of them, if they're great, and so forth, they had a weakness. They may have had a weakness. They had a perfect. I mean, they were not
Nobody's
perfect.
perfect, yeah, except for
I mean,
Jesus.
yeah, right. Yeah, really. But no, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
Like
unbelievable.
John F. Kennedy, we know
Oh, yeah.
about the women in the pool at the
Sure,
White House.
yeah, yeah.
Whatever. So what? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
who are you to, people come, one thing people do is they like to, they find out somebody's Achilles heel and they like to jump on it because it makes them feel righteous.
It makes them feel more important.
Makes not only important, but they feel
that makes them
righteous or
feel
they're better
right,
than.
better than,
Well,
yeah.
I'm better than because I'm not having an affair behind my wife. Oh, is that so? But didn't you do that 11 years ago? It's like those guys that came to stone that adulteress. Remember with Jesus?
Oh,
And
yeah.
he says, okay, it's the law. They're trying to catch him, you know. And so he says, okay, yeah, you can stone her to death. And they're shocked. He's going to let us, this man of peace and healing? He said, but let the first stone come from the one here who's not had this sin. And they all drop the rocks and go away.
Yeah.
Because yet we need to learn that our only goodness, our only righteousness comes from the Lord. He paid the price on the cross. You and I are sinners, saved by grace. And so you're right. Everybody, nobody's perfect. But I tell you, Martin Luther King sure did a great job.
Oh, yeah. He did. The good he
And
did
you-
so
oh, my-
far outweighs
Now, hold it.
anything.
Now, all the guys in
everything.
history, I'm talking to the guy.
all
It's
the
almost like
guys in
it's almost like I'm talking to the guy with Abe Lincoln who was with you took his clothing.
Yes.
That
so
had to
in my
had to make you
hands-
want to do more research on the man.
Yeah, I mean, really, what I did after, I followed that investigation until he was arrested in London, England, and brought back. I was there.
Oh, that Sirhan
at
guy?
the FBI office in Memphis. Yeah. No. I'm talking about Martin, the guy that shot Martin Luther King, James Earl Ray.
Oh, James
Yeah,
Earl
James
Ray.
Earl Ray. I followed. I followed. Of course, I went into work there every day, and I followed that investigation until James Earl Ray was arrested. But getting back to him now, later, I went down to that Fleabag hotel where James Earl Ray was standing and where he took the shot.
Okay, so he rented a room at the other hotel across the street.
Yeah, it was on Main Street there in Memphis, a Fleabag type hotel. That's where James Earl Ray, Dr. King's assassin.
Yeah,
That's where he.
It's
he
still
took
standing today. That hotel, I don't know.
Probably, but I think
I know the one where Dr. King was is still there.
Yeah, they probably changed it. I haven't been there in years, but I went down there personally.
Yes.
I went upstairs to. He was in the bathroom, and he rested the gun on the windowsill. Okay. And the Lorraine Hotel was from the window in the bathroom. It was angled down. Okay, so he had a perfect shot. There and steady and everything. And so that's where he was when he shot him. And then as soon as he shot him, he left the gun there. He did not run out on the street with that gun in his hand, that rifle in his hand. And so he left it there and took off in this white Mustang and toward Atlanta, and then he got away, and so he ended up going to Vegas. He attended a bartender school. Eric Starville Galt was one of
So
his.
we never caught him. I thought they caught him that day.
No. Oh, no. He got out of the country.
No.
I mean, he went up through Canada.
Yeah.
Oh, he got
What's
out.
the name Sirhan? Is that what kind of a?
No, he's the one who shot
I know
Robert Kennedy.
No, we're talking about James Earl Ray.
Yeah, we're talking about James Earl Ray. Sirhan shot Senator Robert
Kennedy.
Kennedy. Yeah.
So why did James Earl Ray? Did he say why he shot Martin Luther King?
He never would admit it.
He never admitted
no.
it. Did he go to jail for it?
Oh yeah, he got life imprisonment. He died in jail there in Tennessee.
But he never would admit it?
No, I don't think. No, to my knowledge, he never admitted that he actually did it. No, no. But he spent the rest of his life in prison. Okay, and but anyways, getting back to that situation. Later on, after I became a Secret Service agent, and my first office was Memphis, and then later on I was transferred to our headquarters in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
I received this memo from our legal counsel's office. Now, this was in the 70s, okay, yeah. And I received this memo from our legal counsel's office to me, advising me that I might be called upon to testify before the House Subcommittee on the Assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. This was several years after everything, and I have the original memo. I mean, I have all
Wow.
these documents at home. I mean,
Yeah,
I have
you're a
everything.
part of
I have
history.
everything. And
Wow.
so, but anyway, that's basically what happened there. And you know, it was just when you see these things, it's like when you look at, say, President Truman, okay, or any
Who you got to meet too, right?
historical. I was assigned to him out there. I was out there for not for 2 or 3 years, but I was out there assigned to him for this time in the during the summer of 1969, and that's when he was one of my favorite presidents, and he was like
Why?
5'7". He was feisty. You know, he had a high school education.
Yeah.
That's all. You know, he had a
Yeah.
high school
Truman.
education. Truman. That's right.
The buck stops here. But he also had to make the most profound decision.
He did. That will go down in infamy for as long as the earth stands.
What
What
happens before Truman facing a living God, knowing he killed hundreds of thousands of people at Hiroshima, or gave the go-ahead? I mean, but it did save many lives.
But when asked about that, he says, I have no remorse whatsoever because it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives.
Well, that's a real leader, is it not? Is that not a real leader?
He says, I may have to make the decision. And you know, the Roosevelt people, he was not in the loop on that the Manhattan Project where they were making the atomic bomb. Truman did not, he was not in the loop.
Even though he was the VP at the time.
He was the vice president, and here Roosevelt dies down in Warm Springs, Georgia.
Yeah. Now, he was a great president.
He was.
The only thing to fear is fear itself. Did you meet him?
No.
Oh.
No.
Do what you can with what you have where you are.
One of the things about Truman, he had humility.
Did he?
You would think that someone who came who from his background and everything, he would get cocky or this or that. Ooh, man, look, I'm great. Blah blah blah. He was the opposite. He could not understand why people were always praising him. Okay, he says all I did was be president, and the day he left the White House to fly over to Kansas City and then to Independence, he was able to change from being president of the United States to a regular American citizen on that flight. And when he got there, he was just as...
Where did he and his wife spend the rest of their lives?
In Independence, Missouri. That's where he's from. That's where his house is. The house belonged to her.
I'm going to ask you this, though. Hold on. Now, you know that I've been doing this 29 years, and I've interviewed multiple presidents.
I can see some of those young photographs.
I know. I've interviewed presidents and kings and queens, and you have got to meet a lot of famous people. Right. You bring up the humility of Truman.
Yes.
I got to interview Dr. Billy Graham, too.
Oh.
Now, Dr. Graham was probably the humblest individual I ever interviewed. He was just like you and I looking face to face, he and I. Everything that he did that day, was it for me or for the listening audience? He had no agenda whatsoever. Totally surrendered to the Lord. I broached the subject of humility because I wanted that to lead into a question about how he became broken enough to be such a teachable young man. But he interrupted me, and to this day I wish he hadn't. I said, well, I'd like to talk about humility. So Dr. Graham leans in, he goes, well, Rhett, if we're talking about it, we haven't got it. And, I don't know that I was willingly arrogant young, but I didn't have a dad. My dad was a lawyer, was killed in a car accident day before my 5th birthday. So there's a lot lacking there that I didn't get. So, but later in life, I don't think I've ever really been arrogant, but I have been arrogant. I mean, later in life, you're kind of like, ooh. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm surprised God's been as nice to me as he has, because I've always loved people, always loved people.
That's grace, isn't it? Is that what's called grace?
Not knowing how to be a leader, I mean, it's better off, I should be working for Noah, not Noah working for me. I don't know how to be a boss. I never had a dad even, But anyway, so what I want to ask you this, though, is I've noticed that there is a thread. Like, for instance, you and I both knew Bush Sr.
Right.
Every
Right.
time I was with him, that guy made me laugh. Now, it wouldn't be prudent, not at this juncture, read my lips. Well, how you doing there? How's the doctor doing there, Rhett? Anyway, in Vero Beach. But anyway, that's the doctor, his former doctor from the White House, lived here, Bert Lee. But do you notice, I notice a thread. I didn't find Bush to be arrogant.
No.
I didn't find, now, you said Truman was very humble.
Yes, he was. He really
Kennedy
was. He
was
had humility.
Kennedy was, people don't know this. John F. Kennedy may have been really good looking and maybe he liked girls, but I tell you what, that man was a true hero. He put those guys on his back and swam them to that island. You know, I mean, we're talking about a true American hero. Bush Sr. flew, I think he was shot down, wasn't he? He flew
Yes, at age 19.
This is a real American hero.
Yeah, he was shot
so
down.
there's and Dr. Graham, I've noticed that they have a thread of, I would say, humility, hence teachability, flexibility. Because even the Lord says he resists the proud, but gives grace to humble. And you've lived long, you've been very successful in your life. We have. It's you know, you've lived long enough to know, and I know, because I sometimes wonder, how come these people get to be successful and these people are still living a crummy life? And you realize, generally, the know-it-alls don't become very successful. Would you agree to that?
Right, I will agree with that. Yes, definitely.
Because the more humble we get, you put yourself under the authority of someone. You did that as a Marine.
Right.
And you learned authority being under that Marine too. Did you have a good dad?
He was, yeah. I mean, he was there. He was strict.
He was strict,
Oh,
of course.
Was he ever?
Fire and brimstone, right?
Oh yes, oh yeah. And so anyway, we definitely knew right from wrong. We were taught right from wrong. There was no in betweens. You knew exactly what was right and what was wrong.
I am excited to have you. This, of course, will be the first of a few interviews I want to do with you. I've got to get into this book, and I got to look through it. I have not read the book. Here's the book, by the way, if you'd like to read this. I would like to ask you one thing. I'm a marketing guy. Why did you name it Struggle to Zero?
Well, due to my birth and where I was born and the situation under which I came into this earth.
Humble beginnings?
It was unbelievable. Okay, we lived. I was born in this old house. It was a plank, log, old house.
Outhouse?
It didn't have an outhouse.
Oh.
No, we didn't even have an outhouse.
What did you use?
Where do you think you went?
You went outside somewhere?
You went, yes, you did. And it was really bad during the winter.
Oh, my word.
Oh, it was terrible. So, but I don't even remember. We didn't even have windows in the house. It was that bad.
No windows, no running water.
No, oh, no. We drank all of our water from the spring. I mean, it was so bad. It's awful. But
and yet today, I can pick this up and make a phone. You remember you used to call overseas and it cost you $100 to talk for 3 minutes? Right now, I can pick this up and make a phone ring in Russia in 30 seconds.
Right.
25 seconds.
Right.
Did you think you'd live to see all this? Is it
know.
wild?
It was
cars that drive themselves.
Yeah. See, the struggle thing came from the fact the circumstances under which I was born was so below par or zero. I mean, you had to struggle to even get up to par or zero.
Yeah.
As far as food,
Struggle
the
to
biggest
zero.
thing of the day was to find enough food to eat. And
so you were dirt
it was
poor.
Lower than I mean, it was. I don't know. It was terrible, and it's all. Sometimes it was embarrassing to me to go into all this. But if you're going to write a book, an autobiography, you need to write it the way it was.
Now, are you a reader?
Yeah, I have.
Aren't you amazed at what you told here that you wouldn't tell normally?
Right.
For some reason, writing is a catalyst. And I try to tell young people, go to the library. You can have a conversation with Abraham Lincoln. All the greats, they wrote. And when men write, they tend to, for some reason, it's like you know that a deathbed confession is acceptable in a court of law?
Yes.
At the end of my life, I said, no, I didn't do that. That's admissible in a court of law, or I did do it.
And the reason that this whole thing came It was an accident, okay?
Yeah.
I started writing a book for my family and friends only. I had no intention
For posterity.
of trying to get it published. That was just, I didn't even think about it.
Okay.
Because I didn't think anyone would be interested in it, or whatever. So it just happened. It happened by accident. I was I was sitting there in the den where the TV was one night, and this ad came across the screen. Oh, an 800 number, okay?
Yeah.
800 number, and said, if you have a manuscript or interested in having a book published, dial this number.
And you did.
And I was sitting there, I have an inquisitive mind, and,
Yeah.
and it's, I want to try things. So anyway, I dialed that number, and I told the gentleman that I talked with the reason I phoned and this and that. But anyway, and after he listened to everything, and I'd already had my manuscript written, but I was just not going to. Didn't think about having it published, whatever, paying to have it published or whatever. So that's what happened. He said, send it to me, and I mailed it to this publishing company,
what
actually
happened?
over in New Jersey.
Did they charge you to have an editor edit it, or
No, I did the editing
So
myself.
You're pretty good at dotting the I's and crossing
Yeah,
the T's.
I mean, that was the hardest part. Every time I read through it, try to edit it or whatever, I always found mistakes.
You always
a
will.
comma.
Yeah.
It was awful, but I always found mistakes.
How about the way you presented things? I have a friend of mine. She's had 18 New York Times bestsellers.
Oh.
And she said, Debbie Maycomber writes chick lit. It's called chick literature, female romance. But anyway, she's had a bunch of Hallmark movies and stuff. She said every book she writes, she says she reads no less in its entirety 10 times because you have to go through it. I'm a writer myself. I write poetry and stuff. You got to, even though your lazy side wants to control you, rewrite. The sign of a pro, right? Rewrite, 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 even with songwriting. So you went back many times.
Oh.
Now, so what I want to know is, okay, so you go back as a dotting the I's, crossing the T's, grammatically. Did you also find yourself rearranging things
Yes.
so it became more appealing to read?
Yes, I did. Yes, definitely.
How long did it take you to do that whole thing?
I was at this about 4 years.
4 years of your life.
Yeah,
and your life.
Yeah, on and off, man. And I'd have an idea in the middle of the night. Oh, my goodness. And then I would try to write it down.
Now, this is available on Amazon.
It is Amazon.
Have you sold a few? I mean, because you're not a famous character.
I haven't really tried to publicize it as much as I should. I haven't, because I'm doing other things, really. But anyway, I'm involved in all kinds of stuff.
Are you?
Yeah. And so I haven't really, I need to do more.
Well, maybe I can help you do that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this. I've been wanting to jump in and help people with their books. I had a marketing firm. So when I was in upstate New York, I did jingles and radio and TV, but I created the ads. I didn't have a radio show back then. But there are truths in marketing, and I just, anyway, I've got to take this book, and I'm going to start reading it. You and I are going to get together again and do some more.
Yeah, there's so much information in the segments, like we haven't touched upon
There's
the
so much.
presidents that I protected. We haven't touched upon the history of the presidents.
Oh,
and
and this is fun for me. And plus, whatever we do here, long after you're gone and I'm gone, the great thing is now we have a thing called podcasts, which essentially is an audio library.
Right.
And somebody can go to that 100 years from now and hear this conversation. Who knows how long it'll last?
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, that's the situation now.
Well, I'm excited
like
for it.
the history of presidential assassinations. And,
I want to talk about it all.
And one of the things I did as a Secret Service agent, among other things, we're cross-trained to perform all duties within the Secret Service: protection, criminal violations, and everything.
Did you know the former FBI director? No, the CIA director, Richard. He lives in town here. I forgot Richard's last name.
I've never have met him.
I'm going to introduce you. He's the former director, top dog at CIA.
Now, Stephanie, my wife, her dad retired from the CIA. Okay, he was a naval officer during World War II, based in San Francisco,
You know what I
And
want to do
Naval
next time we get together?
Intelligence
I'd like to learn what I don't really know these different groups. I can say this that you know the FBI. What do they do? What falls under their umbrella? The CIA. What falls under their umbrella? I mean, I've had a lot of these guys in the show. The guy that shot Osama bin Laden's been on my show. I mean, the people that trained him how to shoot are right down here at the. Have you been down to the SEAL Museum?
Yeah, I have.
Oh yeah,
It's
is that amazing?
It is.
Okay, well, listen, we are out of time for today.
Okay, yeah.
Don Bell, get this book. You'll also be seeing soon an ad in Vero's Voice magazine. You can order it from there. You can order it right now. And we'll be doing
Look on
Amazon.com and get that, which is great. And thanks for coming in
Okay.
and sharing.
Thanks very much. It was good to
Yeah.
see you again.
Well, good to get to know you better.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have some
let's say
fun.
There's a lot of territory.
Wonderful. Hey,
Unbelievable.
thanks
Okay.
for honoring me
Thank you very much.
dropping this off.
Okay.
You dropped this off a
Okay.
few weeks ago, and
Yeah.
I'm sure glad you left your card in there too, so I could
Yes, I
follow
did.
up.
I did.
Yesterday, you called me, and you come up on my phone at Secret Service.
Oh,
So I'm
really?
with somebody,
No,
and
no,
she
no,
goes,
no.
"Oh, well, I got to get my hair cut and get my beard trimmed." And she goes, "Oh, Secret Service." So I said, "She said, what's that?" I said, "Well, I can't tell you."
Okay. Yeah. Are we? Did we
Yeah,
stop?
we're gonna say goodbye now.
So-
I'm Rhett
so-
Palmer. Thank you for coming on. Hey, who loves you, baby?